Hello everyone, ladies, gentlemen, distinguished attendees. We are pleased today to welcome you among us to the side event on building stronger REDD+ cooperation under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, organized by the Climate Change Center of South Korea and the Moroccan Alliance for Climate and Sustainable Development and the Observatoire of Environment and Environment Protection in Morocco. As we all know, the world continues to face the worsening climate change impacts. And as we keep moving towards inexorably warmer climate, millions are at risk of experiencing extremely and erratic climate impacts and conducting to loss and damages. So climate scientists have emphasized the significance and cost effectiveness of natural climate solutions, thus as strategies in our fight against climate change. With forest ecosystems having significant mitigation potential, the reduction emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, REDD+, has been gaining traction over the recent years and has become one of the most popular programs for climate change mitigation action in the forestry sector. In addition, the REDD+ is also proven to produce co-benefits for the people and in the biodiversity conservation. This side event will share knowledge about the REDD+ under the Paris Agreement regime for countries, governments, and private sector who have interest to engage in climate change programs. Therefore, I'm welcoming our speakers today who accepted nicely our invitation, namely Mr. Dr. Raehyun Kim, who will be talking about the REDD+ country cooperation under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Then we will have Mrs. Federica Brietta, just next to me, who will enlighten us about the demand for REDD+ and how these programs can be funded. Then we will have an online intervention from the safeguards needed for Article 6 and private sector investment REDD+ programs to be successful from Mrs. Regan Peiroj-Mahakji, the Senior Program Officer at Center of People and Forests. Then afterwards, we will welcome Mr. Khalid Charki from Morocco to talk about the Morocco forest strategy and the argan tree as a case project study. So, not to be more late than that, I will give the floor to Mrs. Raehyun Kim. Please, if you can share the presentation, the online presentation for us.
Hello everyone, I'm Raehyun Kim, a senior scientist from the National Institute of Forest Science in the Republic of Korea. First of all, I'm really sorry I cannot join this side event on site. And so today, I'm glad to have a chance to share an idea with you. The title of my presentation is REDD+ Country Cooperation under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This is the status of Warsaw REDD+ framework. Currently, 86 countries participate in the Warsaw REDD framework now. Among them, only 8 countries have registered focal point only, and 60 countries have completed technical assessment of their own reference emission level and reference level. Moreover, 11 countries have submitted reduction result above the technical assessment by UNFCCC Secretariat. And then 7 countries have received result-based payment with their reduction result. This means, except for developed countries and some economy-wide countries like the Republic of Korea, then approximately 80% of developing countries in UNFCCC, the member parties they already participate in virtual Red Plus framework. Then, how big is reduction outcomes record result through WRF? The 11 parties have submitted reduction result. The total reduced accumulative amount is around 9 billion tons of carbon dioxide, and annual reduced amount is 1.4 billion tons of carbon dioxide. This is a bigger amount than the annual emissions from the Republic of Korea. Korea is among the top 10 in annual greenhouse gas emissions with 0.7 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Therefore, it is highly expected to increasing emission reductions if all developing countries of the REDD Plus country submitted their reduction result. In the case of REDD Plus, the concept of MRV, measuring, reporting, and verifying, is very, very important because REDD Plus is the part that significantly contributes to the emission reduction. Since REDD Plus activities should be at a national level, and it has to implement the 4 essential factors if a country wants to participate in the virtual REDD Plus framework. The essential factors make national strategy or action plan, take an approved removal emission reference level, and establishes the National Forest Monitoring System and a system for providing information on how the safeguards are being addressed and respected. In other words, building a national MRV system is very, very important. And the REDD Plus result reported and assessed through biennial update report, BUR, and international consultation and analysis, that is ICA. The important point is all the implementation and procedure operating by UNFCCC. This is why the reduction outcomes from virtual REDD Plus framework contributed to parties' national determined contribution. So I think that we need information on MRV level of all REDD Plus countries because to check what element war needs support and what countries have a priority to support from the other countries. So my team developed criteria and indicators to REDD Plus MRV assessment and assessed around 50 REDD Plus countries. So I published a paper in RAND journal name of RAND. Here we divided the countries into 3 groups. Group 1 is included the countries which submitted reference emission level and reference level. Group 2 is Group 2 submitted emission reduction as a result with applied their approved REL and RL. And then Group 3 does the countries that received result-based payment as an incentive finally. So Group 3 shows the high level of MRV in the most element in the general. However, in terms of National Forest Monitoring System and scale of REDD Plus, Group 1 shows a higher level than Group 3. This means all countries in the REDD Plus mechanism are equipped with the National Forest Monitoring System and almost of they are implementing REDD Plus activities at the national level. But as you see the chart, REDD Plus countries have to need to enhancement for all elements except National Forest Monitoring System and scale of REDD Plus. If you need more information, please find this paper. So now we have information to grouping countries, REDD Plus implementation and MRB level. Countries were categorized capacity building and implementation. They need to support through ODA, ESG, and CSR aspect bilaterally. However, this kind of support is not relating Article 3 in Paris Agreement. For the full implementation country, they could receive result-based payment as incentive from bilateral and multilateral and public and private sector. Also, this support is not relating Article 6 too. Regarding on ITMOS, I really hope to accept negotiation text on Article 6 of Paris Agreement in this year, Glasgow. So if then, the reduction outcomes under the virtual REDD Plus framework could transfer to achieve national determined contribution target for the other countries through cooperative approach in accordance with Article 6.2 of Paris Agreement. Yes, this chart is showing a concept where is useful place of REDD Plus emission reduction. So RBP is not involved in national determined contribution boundary, but because the purpose of RBP is just give incentive for reduction effort from REDD Plus countries. However, the REDD Plus ITMOS internationally transferred mitigation outcomes could contribute for a party's NDC and allocated target for a company in the nation. How about carbon neutrality? Simply net zero. The REDD Plus ITMOS, based on the virtual REDD Plus framework, fully contribute for all parties NDC and net zero target. Also, RBP based on virtual REDD Plus framework could contribute for companies net zero because there are some emissions remaining if a company achieved allocated reduction target. This concept needs more discussion because it just developed under a situation in Korea. Briefly, in conclusion, many REDD Plus countries already reduced emissions from forest loss around 9 billion carbon dioxide tons accumulatively under the virtual REDD Plus framework. And now we need to consider an application the huge amount of emission reduction through the REDD Plus mechanism, not only related on Article 6, but also carbon net zero aspect. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please send any questions to my email address. Thank you. Bye.
Experts in environmental science and ecological engineering, forest resource assessments, and forest policies and strategies on climate change and national GHG inventories in the LULUCF sector. Dr. Kim earned his PhD in bioresource and ecology from the Korea University, and currently he's working as a senior scientist in the National Institute for Forest Science in the Republic of Korea. Thank you so much, Dr. Raehyun, for enlightening us. It was very interesting to share the outcomes of your research. Just not to go too far, I'm going to lead the floor to Mrs. Federica Brietta. Mrs. Federica Brietta will talk to us about the demand for REDD+ and how these programs can be funded. This is a major question for all the REDD+ subject. Mrs. Federica Brietta is the managing director of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations. She is internationally recognized expert in the development of international agreements related to climate change and specific mechanisms that include emissions resulting from tropical deforestation. She previously was involved in the design and implementation of both Forest Carbon Partnership, Facility of the World Bank, and the UN REDD+ program. So before joining the CFRM, Mrs. Brietta worked for a major European bank and forged professional relationships with Fortune 500 companies such as TICO, General Electric, ADP, AG, and IBM. I'm more impatient than you to hear from her. Please, Mrs. Brietta, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And also greatly enjoyed the previous presentation from Dr. Kim, which actually made my task easier, especially on the first slides, because it's brief for where we are at the moment with REDD+ under the Paris agreements, and the accounting was excellent. And so very briefly, you already told us, but about 90% of the world tropical rainforests are currently participating to the REDD+ mechanism. And as he previously said, 9 gigatons of reduction have been produced under the REDD+ mechanism that has been captured in the Article 5 of the Paris Agreement. So just in summary, what does it mean, the REDD+ Article 5 under the Paris Agreement? So as Dr. Kim mentioned as well, it's part of the national determined contribution of countries, is a national monitoring system and greenhouse gas inventory. And so the important piece that the sovereign back at national scale. That is part of the global accounting and the goal of going towards 1.5, reduce avoided a temperature increase of 1.5, and it has the corresponding adjustment to avoid the double counting. Very important for the worldwide work towards this the global goal. And then it's part of the global stock take every 5 years under the Paris Agreement. We have we need to write down the contribution of each country to make sure that we're going to climate neutrality by 2050. And so the REDD+ mechanism under the Paris Agreement is included in this process, which is a major element. And last but not least, is part of, there is an independent review that is led by the roster of experts of the UNFCCC. And so while it took some time under the UNFCCC to negotiate the Article 5 and the Paris Agreement, and of which the Warsaw Framework is part of the Article 5, there were some pilot projects, I would say, at smaller scale that were started while we were negotiating the rules under the Paris Agreement. And we can see that they have been produced, though, only 190 million of credit issues, while, like Dr. Kim was telling us, in the same period of time, REDD+ under the Paris Agreement produced almost 9 gigatons of carbon reductions. And so it's just the mass is a scale, and that's exactly what it takes to make sure that we will be able to avoid increase of temperature above 1.5. Why is important, and it took much longer time to negotiate at a national scale, but why is important? It's very important because does not make sense if inside one country there is a reduction of one project of 7 trees, but just next door there is the cutting of 7,000 trees. And so while you have the accounting at the national level, you take in consideration, and if that happens, there are not going to be results under REDD+. And so that's why the national-driven, national-scale accounting is paramount into REDD+. And here, so once the REDD+ credits are produced, they go into the UN Info Hub. And as Dr. Kim showed, there are about 11 countries are in there, and there are the 9 gigatons of reductions. So but how the private sector can participate to that? How can reach out those credits? What the CFRN, the Coalition for Rainforest Nation, made available for all countries, a registry where those units are serialized. And so each unit is going to have a single individual number, and so they cannot be double counted and double sell, and that is very important. And so private sector will be able to purchase those credits coming directly from the Paris Agreement and support the effort of the countries. Because at the moment of the 9 gigatons that have been produced, only 4% have been paid. And so we really need to fix that, and the 4% mostly was provided by public fund. We know public fund cannot be all part of the solution, and so really private sector needs to step in. They have a lot of carbon neutrality pledges, and really purchase credits coming from sovereign nations on REDD+ could be really the solution for the climate neutrality. Let me just briefly say the platform and the registry that we put available for rainforest countries after they're in the Info Hub. So what is the space for private sector that are in the countries? There is space for private sector and in the country continue and do their activity and action. The important element that they coordinate with the government and national scale, and therefore their action will be part of the national greenhouse gas inventory, the national determined contributions of the country, and the national reference level of the country. On the other side, who can buy those credits? Really anyone, from governments, by individual consumer, financial sector, and corporation. And so that's the other part of the private sector that can engage with the REDD+ Paris Agreement compliant. And in addition to make this simpler, we also link the registry and the platform to an exchange run by CBL Expensive, and so any private sector that is interested in supporting those activities from REDD+ country can click and provide their bid ask, the ask price, and if there is a bid price from the REDD+ countries, the exchange can happen instantaneously. Last but not least, we just wanted to say it's important that the financing and the price of those credits produced under the Paris Agreement needs to start going higher. Clearly, the $5 there was a starting point under the Green Climate Fund and the FCPF is not enough. Also, the $10 offer is not enough. Opportunity cost in different countries, they're saying really the drivers of deforestation that we are against is really between $27 to $40, with being palm oil, soybean, and cattle ranching. And so it's important that to really have those reduction of scale, price must go higher. We saw that the UK said that the price for carbon in their national account is closer to $120, £20, sorry, and so it's closer really to $150 $50. And so the price for REDD Plus credits under the Paris Agreement at the national level needs to go higher as well to face the opportunity cost that those countries are facing into the country. I'll stop here, be available for the discussion after. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Federica. It is indeed very interesting, the assessment of coalition of rainforest nation. Thank you for sharing with us also the platform and how to facilitate the access and more clearance on the distribution of the REDD Plus funding. So we will now go towards more to know more about the safeguards needed for Article 6 and private sector investment in the REDD Plus programs to be successful. For that, we welcome Mrs. Raehyun Peyrojmahakish, Mrs. Raehyun is a senior program officer at the Recoft for landscapes collaboration in a challenging climate. Her work focuses on developing a portfolio landscape program in Recoft and 7 focal countries, which employs a foreign landscape approach to achieve social and ecological outcomes at scale. Climate mitigation and resilience are the threads putting together this landscape level work, and these focus on opportunities for bankable nature-based solutions, a community-based approach to level up monitoring approaches. My pleasure to give the floor to Mrs. Raehyun, which will be joining us online. Mrs. Raehyun, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, first of all, to the organizers for inviting Recoft to be a part of this important side event at COP26. I will ask, if possible, to kindly share my slides.
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Okay, now I can see the slides as well. Thank you so much. So I appreciated very much the presentations of the 2 preceding speakers who have laid out effectively both the Warsaw Framework REDD infrastructure as well as opportunities for private sector development in the carbon markets, as well as the interesting point on opportunity costs. I will take somewhat of a different angle and discuss from our perspective the pressing need to ensure safeguards, in particular social safeguards, and the role of local communities, and to underscore the predominance that has taken within a lot of the global discussions. Next slide, please. So if you don't mind, I will just share briefly. I work for Recoft. It was traditionally the Regional Community Forestry Training Center for Asia and the Pacific. It has since evolved to take a broader-based approach to the interface between forest communities and the lands in which they live. This includes everything from gender equity and social inclusion to community-based enterprises to governance and tenure and the strategic area of landscapes as an approach to mitigating and adapting to climate change. We focus on the entire region. However, most of the efforts and our physical offices are in Southeast Asia as well as South Asia in Nepal. Next slide, please. So I'll just provide a broad overview of the argument around and the necessity behind climate finance. Next slide, please. So that we know that 1/4 of the greenhouse gases are coming from the land use sector. And within the ASEAN region, this is closer to 42%. In a number of the regional countries, Cambodia, Myanmar, the land use sector is the primary sector for greenhouse gas emissions. And as such, halting and addressing sustainable land use and deforestation within landscape-based approaches is really critical. Central to that is the need to scale up finance and to look at both increasing the amounts of private investment as well as pledges such as through the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use, which we've heard earlier this week, and this question of how to more effectively and efficiently deploy investments and funds within countries and within landscapes. So commitments such as the Glasgow Declaration go part of the way. In addition, through the UNFCCC and through efforts such as finalizing the Paris Rulebook and Article 6, these can in fact be powerful catalysts. And this is necessary both from a sense of providing security and a greater sense of predictability to investors within the private sector when it comes to carbon markets, as well as to providing assurances to national governments, both in terms of the alignment with nationally determined contributions, but also how voluntary carbon markets can be effectively integrated within jurisdictional approaches, how this nesting can take place. So it really is essentially, even though to some degree it may be questionable whether or not this will be the source of major funds into REDD and into halting deforestation, it sets a very important policy precedent that is required from a number of different perspectives. Next slide, please. Article 6. So talking generally about Article 6 and the need for safeguards. Next slide. So Article 6.2 is, in fact, all of Article 6, but in particular 6.2 is a powerful opportunity and channel for investment in developing countries in particular. So voluntary carbon markets can support countries in achieving climate mitigation potential where policy arenas, due to perhaps the ability or challenges in the ability to reach political agreement or limited public funds, or in fact remoteness, which is often a case in areas where there's tropical forest, where that fails. This is where the real potential for voluntary carbon markets to come in. So it is essential that Article 6.2 and the methods associated with it be resolved at this current COP. And as for some of the party suggestions during the negotiations, a 2028 deadline is not ambitious enough. It needs to be resolved urgently. Next slide, please. So forest landscapes being a key part of the solution. Next slide. So 75% of the potential for cost-effective land-based mitigation lies within developing countries. If this is met, it takes us more than a third of the way to achieving the 1.5 goal. However, the fact that the majority of the world's vulnerable, marginalized, and climate exposed communities live within developing countries puts them particularly at risk. Therefore, it underscores the need to focus on safeguards in trying to meet this mitigation potential in the land sector. Next slide. So I believe many will be familiar with actions to achieve forest landscape-based mitigation, and this includes reduced deforestation, and I would I would clarify or add to it that it is not simply the retention of existing areas of forested land, but rather preserving and conserving existing natural forest. So I think that that is a key qualification. It's essential to actually stop the deforestation as opposed to replacing existing primary forest. Restoration of forest ecosystems. So this idea of forest landscape restoration, it is essential that it take place through a lens of safeguards, both ecological as well as social, and that it lead to where appropriate local community benefits and incentives, and in those areas where that are considered to be high conservation value, that be taken into account, and the quality of the habitat be retained. Carbon-rich agriculture, ranging from agroforestry, low-till, no-till, terracing, reduced burning, are one of the approaches, and of course a broader shift of diet, leading to broader ecological as well as health benefits, primarily moving towards a plant-based protein diet. Next slide. So Recoft, as well as a growing coalition of partners, argue quite strongly that Indigenous people and local communities really are essential and are key to solving land-based climate mitigation challenges. Next slide. 35% of protected areas globally are considered to be owned, managed, or otherwise under the territories of Indigenous and local communities. Only about 1% of climate finance is currently reaching them. So this discrepancy is one of the key areas going forward that REDD, the voluntary carbon markets, and in particular Article 6 will need to consider how best to implement and address. Next slide, please. So some of these safeguards in the land use sector and relating to REDD. Next slide, please. Over the past week in the negotiations, there has been a clear request and demand from a number of the parties that safeguards around Indigenous and human rights are referred to in Article 6.4 and 6.8. However, it becomes increasingly essential that be included for Article 6.2, with its real emphasis on ITMOs and market-based mechanisms. So it really is critical that there be explicit reference. Next slide. Without having these safeguards, in particular the social safeguards in place, voluntary carbon markets can ultimately lead to the cementing of existing power structures, increased poverty through the alienation and the loss of land by local communities and their displacement. And typically, it is the world's poorest that are disproportionately reliant on forests and forest landscapes for subsistence, food, as well as livelihoods. There's the risk of nationalization of Indigenous lands, of conflict over natural resources, such as water, which is increasingly exacerbated by climate change, and of course, conversion of natural forests to plantations, which is a growing concern with a number of the net zero commitments and pledges towards halting deforestation. Next slide, please. So we consider that the Cancun safeguards are vital and they are necessary, but we may need to begin thinking and articulating additional safeguards. So they're necessary but not sufficient. Next slide. From our perspective, some of the key principles for voluntary carbon markets under Article 6 have to do with what is already enshrined within the Cancun safeguards around free, prior, informed consent. But more than that, we consider it to be an opportunity for transformative measures. So as opposed to simply the principle of do no harm, rather it can support realization of the rights and aspirations of Indigenous people and local communities. It is essential that any design and implementation of REDD-related projects and programs be transparent, be accessible, be communicated in ways that are relevant and that are accompanied by grievance mechanisms, that traditional knowledge systems are acknowledged and are built in wherever possible, and that all members are provided with full opportunity to make decisions and participate, irrespective of gender, age, and physical condition. And again, relating back to the point on the transformative ability of carbon projects, in fact, we've seen within the region under results-based REDD projects, there really is tremendous potential to strengthen land rights and to further this. And of course, funds should be made accessible. And this is really the key of it. Local communities, Indigenous people need to directly receive the benefits and the funds in order to shift away from other opportunities within land and deforestation associated commodities. Next slide, please. And in addition to the social, of course, the ecological principles, especially around biodiversity, are increasingly being recognized. It's necessary that a landscape approach that is integrated and holistic be taken to looking at forested areas and overall ecosystem management. This needs to take into account the multiple functions and benefits provided by forests. Natural forests should be conserved and biodiversity protected. Again, to underscore this point, that it's not simply about retaining a certain amount or percentage of land under forest, but of retaining the existing old growth forests wherever possible. And again, key is the incentivization of forest protection through existing guardians and stewards of the land, which are in many of the heavily forested tropical countries, Indigenous and local communities. And of course, as recognized under the Cancun safeguards, they need to address reversals as well as displacement. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide. It's to say that a lot of these principles that I've just articulated resonate with other key organizations in this space, and with a view to ensuring that the benefits coming from voluntary carbon markets and from REDD go directly to those stakeholders with the greatest potential and leverage to actually realize the sustainable forest management outcomes that are required. A People's Forest Partnership initiative will be launched tomorrow at COP26. And you can see the details here. It will be at 3:45. So we invite anybody participating or watching this to also learn more about associated safeguards. Next slide, please. And that is it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Raehyun. Your presentation was very insightful. Indeed, the human rights and the ecological safeguards are visceral to just transition, not only for the REDD+. And this is a huge discussion and debate that should be taken more seriously during the negotiations nowadays. Ram, thank you so much for your intervention. We are now moving to more local view with Mr. Khalid Charki, who's a forest engineer and holding PhD on natural resources management. He's currently the chief of the division in charge of international cooperation and studies within the Water and Forest High Commission in Morocco. He's also chair of the African Group of Negotiators within the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. Mr. Khalid will talk about Morocco forest strategy and will enlighten us about the Argan tree as a case study. Please, Mr. Khalid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hajar. I'm first of all, and on behalf of the Water and Forest Department in Morocco, I would like to thank warmly the organizers for inviting us to such important event entitled Building Stronger REDD+ Cooperation under Article 6 Paris Agreement. This event is timely fit and thematically important and also aligned with the negotiation agenda and the unification, and its outcome will be surely of a huge added value. I will begin my presentation. Next slide, please. The plan of the presentation, I will begin by giving a brief overview on the global situation on forest ecosystems and a small talk on the REDD+ mechanism itself. Then I will share with you more information about Forest of Morocco strategy, and we will end with some recommendation. Next, please.
We have Mr. Khalid have a slow connection. Mr. Khalid, are you still with us? Unfortunately, we are losing Mr. Khalid Charki. Let's hope he can join us in a few seconds. No. Unfortunately, we lost Mrs. Khalid Charki due to bad net connections. So far, Mr. Khalid Charki was intending to highlight the interesting Moroccan strategy on forest management, which was quite success so far, and mainly the Argan tree as a case study, which had a significant impact in local communities and also at the environmental and climate levels. Before going back to Mrs. Dr. Youngsu Koyu, welcome among us. Mrs. Youngsu is the chairperson of the Board of Climate Change Center. We would like to open the floor for any questions or discussions that may come from the audience. So, I can have one question, please, addressed to Mrs. Federica and Mrs. Raehyun too. We heard on the World Leaders Summit last week, or early this week, that the leaders agreed to give the deforestation an important part to fight against deforestation. And to promote forestation in the coming years or in their target implementation. So how do you think this is going to be concretely disposed, and at what extent should be agreed that there will be an important outcomes just in the 5 years ahead, not going until the 2030 or 2050. Are they really ready for that?
I guess I'll take it first, and thank you so much for this question, interesting questions. I mean, I would say every time that we have world leaders on stage supporting reduction from emission from deforestation and the forest in general is a positive thing to have. However, in the past 10, 15 years that I've been working on this issue, we have been having so many declarations of similar to this one. And so, unfortunately, we are afraid that without specific tools for implementing, that will be just a great declaration. They got the lamplight. There was a lamplight last week, but then there's not really, specific follow-up. What we believe really should be the important piece here, and that we are beyond the commitment. At this point, really, funds really should go to the countries. As we saw from presentation today, rainforest countries are reducing their emission, they are increasing carbon stocks, and so it's very important that money start flowing now. We also have the tools. We have, as we saw the previous presentations of previous speaker, REDD+ under the Paris Agreement, Article 5 is complete and countries are moving forward. So we just need to unleash the funding and pay for the results achieved and the future results using these tools, using this mechanism, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I guess, the last piece that I would like to say is also regarding the cost. Prices that have been offering so far are, $5 to $10 is not clear enough. As mentioned before, we've been doing an analysis of opportunity costs in different rainforest countries, and the drivers are really of deforestation, from the $20 to the $50, as I was mentioning before. And so the price for carbon needs to really increase for that. And so for us, it's important that out of COP26, Article 6 is finalized and really can give a guidance to private sector on how they can channel the funding using one standard, one goal, and one agreement, which is the Paris Agreement.
Great. Yes, fully agree. Thank you so much, Mrs. Frederica. I think Mrs. Khalid is back to us. So we're going to back to him. Briefly, Mr. Khalid Charki, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry. I don't know what was happened, but I'm here again. I cannot show the presentation. It's not shared, the presentation, or?
We are at slide 1, within the forest ecosystems.
At slide 1.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was talking on the importance of forest ecosystem, that forest ecosystem are playing a key role for the SDGs, for the Agenda 2030. They contribute enormously in food security and also water security and biodiversity, energy. Besides, they contribute also with a very huge rate in protection from natural disaster, landscape beauty for ecotourism, and air purification for human health, the recreation and relaxation spaces. And we shall not forget here the minor role that it plays in climate change, either in mitigation or adaptation. Next, please. And also, one major element that I want to share with you here is a specificity of forestry sector. The forest at the intersection area between Rio Convention and other international agreements. When we invest in forest protection and development, we are contributing to all agreements, to UNFCCC, to UNCCD, to CDB, and also to Agenda 2030, as I said before, and also to United Nations Forum on Forestry. Next, please. In the other side of the picture, The world has lost around 200 million hectares of forests since 1990. And also the rate of net annual forest loss during the period from 2010 to 2020 is around 4.7 million hectares. And Africa had the largest annual rate of net forest loss during the same period, which has been situated at 3.9 million hectares. And also, which is very important, that the total carbon store in forest is increasing, and also healthy and productive forest ecosystem are becoming more scarce due to the pressure they are facing, which are following currently an uptrend. I will share with you the three drivers of forest degradation in the world. The very rapid population growth. We have some estimation that population will grow more and more, and also change in the dietary habit and pattern coupled with rising consumption levels. Average daily individual consumption has been increased by 5% between 2000 and 2015, according to the FAO. And also here, it's very important to share with you, to highlight one important element is that around 33% of food products finish in the garbage, are wasted. And this is mean that 30% for energy used is wasted, and also water used is wasted, time, investment, and land. But in the other side, this waste is contribute enormously in greenhouse gas effect. The third one is the accelerated urbanization. Now, I will share with you some our modest reflection on the REDD plus mechanism. And the REDD plus mechanism within UNFCCC negotiation, we can divide this negotiation process onto phases. The first negotiation cycle from 2005 to 2015, during which the parties have taken 16 decisions and have raised two issues. Two main issues. The first issues has been addressed entirely, notably the REDD methodological framework, technical, institutional, governance, monitoring, and please, the next slide. I forgot to, please. Yes. Now I'm talking on the REDD plus mechanism, and within the UNFCCC negotiation process, we can divide it onto phases. The first one, during which we have tackled two kind of issues which has been addressed entirely, REDD plus methodological framework. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you, Mr. Khalid.
Yes.
Mr. Khalid,
Yes.
please, if you could brief the presentation, you have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I will, but the main element here in this presentation is that for the second cycle, till now, we don't know how is the shape of that mechanism regarding also financial and support, coordination support. And this is the big issue with the mechanism. Now, I will move to forestry sector in Morocco. During 2020, His Majesty King Mohammed VI has launched on February the new framework strategy, which has been entitled the Forests of Morocco 2020-2030 strategy. It's a long-term strategy for all generations based on an inclusive, sustainable, and wealth-creating management model based on 5 orientations. The first one is participative, productive model, and sustainable model, development territory, and also biodiverse model. Now, I will share with you the ambition and the lever. We have 4 main levers for the strategy. Is to enhance the afforestation efforts, to move from 50,000 hectares per year to 100 hectares per year, and also to improve the success rate of afforestation, targeting 80% instead of 48% currently. And also to strengthen the incentive mechanism that you are using with the local population to give them an amount which is equivalent to fodder produced in an area which has been prohibited for grazing in order to enable trees to grow. And also to improve the participatory approach through the mobilization of a facilitator, mediating with local population, and also to create 200 forestry organization at local level, which will serve as a space of debate, a space of dialogue for to design local programs. Now I move to access. The strategy is based on 4 axes. The first one is the re-engineering and structuring the participatory approach. The second one is differentiating and developing species according to their vocation, and to invest and modernize the core business. And the last one is the institutional framework. Next, please. Regarding the first axis, next. The first axis, we have mini programs. The important of them is to contract participatory protection on forested area through an incentive mechanism, and also to adapt participatory management to vocation to make difference between national park and forest area. Also promote hunting with association and companies, private companies, according to adequate specification. Next, please. The second axis, differentiation and developing species according to their vocation. The main program are develop productive partnership with the private company, and also to organize the transfer of skills from concession to the public to conserve biodiversity and continue combating desertification. The last one is to promote the ecotourism sector within the network of 10 national parks. Next, please. It externalized the seedling production and the nursery management to private sector, to digitize the core of business to control deployment in the field, and to modernize the silvicultural technical approach for the success of reforestation, and lastly, mobilize forestry staff by upgrading working condition. Next, please. Regarding the last pillar, dealing with institutional reform, the forest department will be structured will be transformed into an agency, a public establishment, taking mainly into account the sovereign role of the state. We will also adapt the legal framework through a new forest law, and transform human resources by distinguishing profession and supporting the transition. To create also a training and research pool, bringing together all institutions which are active in that area. Now I have here some recommendation, but I think regarding time, I will share with you some information regarding argan tree. Argan tree is a very specific tree here in Morocco. It's an endemic species for Morocco, and we call it tree with 1,000 vertices. And we have a specific program to that species, in which all pieces are studied, from the seedling production to the valorization. Technical pattern also has been hugely modernized, and also we have organized population, because in this area population has a right of use. The legal framework in Morocco recognizes this right of use of population to use fruit that you could harvest from trees, and we are organizing population to and create a cooperative and to help them to valorize this tree and the product that we can extract from the fruits. And within this value chain, from the harvesting till the access to the market. And we are working with many stakeholders on the field, with the cooperative, with other institutional agencies, in order to create enabling conditions for a successful implementation of the projects.
Mr.
If we have
Khalid.
time, I could. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting and insightful. Regardless of the constraints of the time and the connection. Many thanks for your contribution. Really grateful for that. Now we are arriving to the end of this session. I have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Young-soo Ko-yu, which is chair of the Climate Change Center of South Korea.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good morning and good evening. I'm Yu Young-soo, chairperson of the Climate Change Center. It is my great privilege and pleasure to be part of this historic COP26. First of all, let me thank all the people who helped us make this side event possible, to Ms. Hajar, Khamlichi, and our partner organization OPEHM, and the Moroccan Alliance for Climate and Sustainable Development, to the speakers who share their expertise and wisdom, and to all the people who worked so hard to make the preparation for this event. I'm very grateful to all of you. As you may know, the sixth assessment report of the IPCC gave us a warning that we are not on track to realize our climate goals, and that the global warming will further deteriorate. Climate projections also suggest that the global surface temperature of our planet will continue to go up unless we make significant achievement to cut down carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions. As we move forward and continue our fight against this global problem, we should consider alternative options, for example, those ways centered on natural resources and its sustainable management. One of the key functions of the natural ecosystem is to regulate climate, which have long been supported by scientific research and data. Forest ecosystems have a major role to play in stabilizing the climate. Furthermore, the benefits of forest protection and its sustainable management goes beyond improvement of natural ecosystems functions, but also creates co-benefit for people. Forest goods and services directly and indirectly benefit people and improve their well-being as well. These outcomes are particularly impactful given that about 1.6 billion people, inclusive of 60 million indigenous people, rely on forest for their subsistence needs and livelihood. In this view, forestry projects can help countries achieve sustainable development goals. I'd like to share Korea's experience in REDD+. The Korea Forest Service partners with the Forestry Administration of Royal Government of Cambodia since 2015. The project generated a net emission reduction of more than 645,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent and supports in improving the livelihood of forest-dependent communities in Cambodia. However, the same with other climate projects worldwide, wider cooperation at international and national level are necessary to upscale and replicate these projects. I hope that our side event has a chance to inspire the participants about REDD+, and that it could lead to partnership on REDD+ and other forest-related projects. Let's work together to create a better future for us and for our future generations. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. 감사합니다.
Thank you. Thank you.